Despite early organizational strength, Rubio managed to win only a single state primary and failed to gain enough delegates to remain competitive. After losing the Florida primary in March 2016, he suspended his campaign on March 15, 2016. During the campaign, Rubio and Trump engaged in frequent verbal clashes, with Trump mocking Rubio's stature and demeanor. Despite sharp rhetoric, Rubio once calling Trump the most vulgar person to ever aspire to the presidency. Rubio later endorsed Trump in the general election, reflecting a strategic alignment that would shape his future within the GOP. 5. Transformation and shifts in Republican politics, 2017 to 2024. After the 2016 election, Rubio supported many of President Trump's policies despite earlier disagreements, reflecting the GOP's broader shift toward populist conservatism. He helped advance aspects of the administration's agenda, particularly on foreign policy, economic issues, and immigration enforcement. Following the 2020 presidential election, which Joe Biden won, Rubio voiced skepticism about election integrity consistent with many Republican figures, though he ultimately voted to certify the results of the Electoral College, a stance that placed him somewhere between the party's traditional establishment and its Trump-aligned base. By 2024, Rubio had positioned himself as a senior Republican statesman with strong ties to Trump's political coalition. This realignment culminated in a pivotal moment after the 2024 election cycle, when Rubio's political career took an unexpected turn into executive leadership. 6. U.S. Secretary of State, 2025-present, appointment and historic confirmation. In November 2024, President-elect Donald Trump announced his intention to nominate Marco Rubio as the next U.S. Secretary of State. Rubio's nomination was confirmed by the Senate on January 20, 2025, with a historic unanimous vote of 99-0, making him the first Latino in U.S. history to hold this role. He was sworn in on January 21, 2025, as part of the Trump administration's second term. Due to structural changes within the federal government, Rubio also served in expanded capacities, including roles as acting National Security Advisor, acting U.S. Archivist, and briefly as acting Administrator of the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, before USAID's dissolution. Foreign policy and diplomacy. As Secretary of State, Rubio's priorities reflected his long-standing policy interests and conservative worldview. Latin America and Venezuela. Rubio played a central role in shaping U.S. policy in the Western Hemisphere, especially concerning Venezuela. After a U.S. military operation on January 3, 2026, which resulted in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Rubio emerged as a key architect of diplomatic and strategic policy toward the region. His approach emphasized stabilizing Venezuela, reducing foreign influence from China, Russia, and Iran, and restructuring diplomatic and economic engagement in the hemisphere. During Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearings, Rubio stressed the importance of cooperation with Venezuela's interim leadership, the reopening of the U.S. Embassy in Caracas, and eventual political reform in the country. Though strong skepticism remains among some lawmakers about the long-term outcomes of the strategy, diplomatic reorganization. Rubio proposed significant reforms within the U.S. State Department aimed at streamlining operations and reducing bureaucratic overhead. His plan included cuts to personnel and restructuring dozens of offices worldwide to align the agency with conservative foreign policy priorities, a move that generated controversy among diplomats and lawmakers who argued it could weaken America's global influence. Enforcement and diplomacy challenges. Rubio took firm stances in diplomatic incidents beyond Latin America. For instance, in March 2025 he declared South African Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool persona non grata following controversial remarks perceived as politically provocative, a decision that sparked tension between the U.S. and South Africa. Additionally, Rubio has articulated force by necessity contingencies for diplomatic cooperation when compliance with U.S. policy objectives falters, particularly in the context of Venezuela, underscoring his blend of diplomatic negotiation backed by assertive U.S. power. 7. Political philosophy and style. Rubio's political ideology has evolved over time, but several core principles have remained consistent: anti-communism and strong national defense, rooted in his Cuban heritage and family history; fiscal conservatism and limited government, especially early in his career in Florida; interventionist foreign policy, advocating U.S. leadership on issues such as Latin America, China, and global security. Rubio's capacity to adapt politically, moving from establishment conservative to a key Trump administration foreign policy figure, reflects the broader transformation of the Republican Party over the past decade. Critics argue this adaptation has sometimes shifted Rubio away from earlier policy consistency, while supporters view it as pragmatic leadership within changing party dynamics. 8. Personal life and legacy. Marco Rubio married Jeanette Dousteebs in 1998, whom he met as a teenager in Miami. The couple has 4 children, and Rubio has often emphasized the centrality of family, faith, and community in his public messaging. Rubio has also authored books, including his memoir An American Son, 2012, which chronicles his family's immigration story and his journey into politics, as well as a policy book titled American Dreams, Restoring Economic Opportunity for Everyone, 2015. Rubio's legacy is multifaceted. A Cuban-American who ascended to the highest ranks of U.S. government, a Senate leader who bridged establishment and populist wings of the GOP, and a statesman shaping U.S. diplomacy on Latin America and beyond. His tenure as Secretary of State, especially his influence on Venezuela policy and diplomatic reorganization, will likely be studied as a distinct chapter in early 21st century American foreign policy. Conclusion. Marco Rubio's story is a vivid example of the American political journey. A Cuban immigrant's son rising from humble roots. Early success in local and state politics. Prominence as one of the Republican Party's leading senators and 2016 presidential candidate. Evolution into a senior executive leader as U.S. Secretary of State. His career spans periods of major political realignment and has left a lasting imprint on U.S. domestic politics and international relations. Remember to subscribe this channel and like for more video. Thank you. Today we are going to tell you the story of a very powerful political leader, Marco Rubio. Remember to click subscribe and like if you haven't done so, then continue with the talk. Well-sourced life story of Marco Rubio of the United States. Marco Rubio, full life story, 1971 present. Marco Antonio Rubio is an American politician, lawyer, and diplomat who has played an influential role in U.S. domestic politics and global affairs for more than 2 decades. Born to Cuban immigrant parents in Miami, Florida, he rose from modest beginnings to serve as a state legislator, U.S. Senator, and, most recently, as the 72nd U.S. Secretary of State under President Donald Trump's administration. Rubio represents a generation of Republican leaders whose careers reflected the conservative rise of the early 21st century and the shifting dynamics within the Republican Party itself. 1. Family roots and early life, 1971 to 1989. Marco Rubio was born on May 28, 1971, in Miami, Florida, into a working-class Cuban-American family. His parents, who fled Cuba in 1956 during the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista before Fidel Castro's revolution, embodied the immigrant pursuit of opportunity in the U.S. His father worked as a banquet bartender and his mother took on multiple service jobs, including as a hotel maid. These early experiences shaped Rubio's worldview, emphasizing hard work, faith, and patriotism. Rubio spent part of his childhood in Las Vegas, Nevada, where his family briefly relocated, before returning to Florida in 1985. Reflecting on his youth, Rubio has often cited conversations with his grandfather about the devastation of communism in Cuba as formative in his commitment to public service and anti-communist political ideology. In high school, Rubio was an athlete and a passionate student. After graduating from South Miami Senior High School in 1989, he earned a scholarship to play football at Tarkio College in Missouri. Although he left after 1 year, he ultimately pursued higher education in Florida, attending the University of Florida, where he earned a bachelor's degree in 1993, followed by a Juris Doctor from the University of Miami School of Law in 1996. 2. Entry into politics, local and state government, 1998 to 2008. Rubio's political career began at the local level. In 1998, he won a seat on the West Miami City Commission, his first elected office. 2 years later, in a special election, he was elected to the Florida House of Representatives in January 2000, representing District 111. Over the next 8 years, Rubio built a reputation as a conservative rising star within Florida politics. He was elected Majority Leader of the Florida House from 2003 to 2006 and then served as Speaker of the Florida House from 2006 to 2008. As Speaker, Rubio championed fiscally conservative policies. He balanced the state budget without raising taxes and led efforts to curb eminent domain abuses after the controversial Kelo versus City of New London Supreme Court ruling. He also pushed higher education reform and workforce initiatives that expanded vocational training and eased credit transfers between institutions, part of a broader agenda promoting education that directly prepared students for jobs. While his leadership at the state level garnered praise from business groups and conservative organizations, it also drew criticism from opponents who viewed some of his reforms as too ideologically driven. Nonetheless, Rubio's performance set the stage for a leap to national politics. 3. U.S. Senate career, 2010 to 2025, election to the Senate. In 2009, Rubio announced his candidacy for the U.S. Senate seat in Florida, set to replace Republican Mel Martinez. The initial frontrunner was then Republican Governor Charlie Crist. However, Crist split with the Republican Party and ran as an independent, effectively opening the door for Rubio to secure the Republican nomination and ultimately win the 2010 general election in a three-way contest. Rubio took office as a U.S. Senator in January 2011 and rapidly became a prominent figure within the Senate's Republican Conference, particularly as a leader within the Tea Party movement that emphasized limited government, fiscal conservatism, and constitutionalism policy. Positions and Senate leadership. As a senator, Rubio's policy positions aligned with traditional conservative principles. Opposed the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, gun control measures, and same-sex marriage. Criticized climate change legislation and advocated deregulation to stimulate economic growth. Championing interventionist foreign policy on issues such as support for Taiwan and opposition to authoritarian regimes. Despite his conservative credentials, Rubio sometimes broke from his party's hardline wings. His most notable legislative effort was as part of the bipartisan Gang of Eight immigration reform bill in 2013, which sought to offer a pathway to citizenship for some undocumented immigrants who met certain criteria. Although the initiative ultimately failed to advance in the House of Representatives, it demonstrated Rubio's occasional willingness to pursue compromise on complex policy challenges. Within the Senate, Rubio also held significant committee assignments. He served on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, where he became a vocal voice on U.S. policy toward Latin America and global security issues, and on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and Appropriations Committee. Re-elections and shifting Republican coalitions. Rubio won re-election to the Senate in 2016 and 2022, each time reinforcing his standing as one of Florida's dominant political figures and as a national Republican leader. Over time, Rubio's political identity evolved as the Republican Party changed. Initially favored by the establishment and the Tea Party alike, he adapted to the party's growing populist influence in the late 2010s and early 2020s, aligning more closely with its nationalist, security-focused strands while maintaining his conservative policy core. 4. 2016 presidential campaign. In April 2015, Marco Rubio announced his bid for the Republican nomination for President of the United States for the 2016 election. His campaign platform blended traditional conservative themes, a balanced budget, tax reform, strong national defense, and enhanced border security, with a spirited push to appeal to a broader base of voters. Initially seen as a top candidate within the Republican establishment, Rubio's campaign found early success in debates and fundraising. However, as the primary season unfolded, he struggled to compete against insurgent figures like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. Despite